Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
Already a lot of talk about the Yankees offseason. I think some of you need a reality check. We'll get some clarity with Emmanuel Berbari as we'll talk some Yankee hot stove. I know the future. I can see who the next Giant head coach is going to be. I'll tell you who that is. Plus, Nico Harrison fired by the Mavericks. What really happened down there? All of that and more on a new edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome into a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Lots to get into on this episode. We'll talk a little Yankee offseason. We're going to dive into it. The hot stove with Emmanuel Berbari, who covers the Yankees, does the postgame on WFAN, also calls games during the season. You see him on SNY all the time. So we'll get a feel for what's reality and what is not reality. What is fiction and what is nonfiction when it comes to the Yankee offseason. I'll run some names for you about the Giants head coach. I think I know who it's going to be. So I'll give you that name on this episode. Plus, we'll touch on the Nico Harrison firing down with the Mavericks and what I think actually is going on there and how the future will kind of determine what I think happened there. But before we get too deep into the episode, less than 2 weeks before our Nick Ticket giveaway, make sure you are following me on Twitter, retweet my pinned post, and then, of course, subscribe to the show on YouTube for your chance to win a couple of Nick Tickets. Less than 2 weeks to go before that giveaway. All right, before we get to Emmanuel, I wanted to lay out some thoughts on the Yankee offseason, the hot stove, because every single day it seems like we see another big name that's getting floated to the Yankees. One day it's Paul Skeens. Another day it's Tarek Skubal. Another day it's Fernando Tatis Jr., Kyle Tucker. Are they going to be in play for Kyle Tucker? Guys, what planet are you on? There is a 0% chance of those guys ending up with the Yankees. It's almost like that show Pluribus on Apple TV. Are you watching that? That show's phenomenal. Breaking Bad creator. Oh, good stuff there. But back to the Yankees. The Yankee offseason will have one surprise in it. But it's not going to be a new car with a bow on top. It's going to be like cool socks. Like it's going to be something that, it's all right. But it's not going to be the high-ticket items. The Yankees don't have the budget in their budget for another high-ticket item. So if you're sitting around waiting for another 2009 spending spree, pack a lunch, pack a tent. You're going to be here a while. The Yankees are preparing, if anything, to reduce payroll. And it seems like that is a message Yankee fans don't want to accept. Hal Steinbrenner has said it over and over again. He sees $300 million payrolls as unsustainable. Now, look, maybe they're probably not going to be below that by much, and maybe if there's an appropriate move that they want, all right, maybe they end up at 300. But they're not shooting the locks off the wallet and competing with the Dodgers and Mets. And look, I'd like a DNA test of Hal to find out how he's related to George as much as you would. But the Yankees don't operate in the way they used to. The logo might be the same, the name might be the same, but the brand, that's not the same. So if Hal gets his way this offseason, it's going to be a very boring offseason. And plan A is simple. It's simply re-sign Cody Bellinger. They'll probably add some bullpen arms, and there'll be a surprise move here or there, but that's probably going to be it. There's not going to be any fireworks. There's not going to be any $350 million contract for Kyle Tucker. They're not going to steal Pete Alonso away. They're not going after Fernando Tatis Jr., whose contract runs through 2034. Now, if you want an offseason with some intrigue, it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that would require really just one thing. If you want interesting, I'm not saying a great offseason, but an interesting offseason for the Yankees, it will get very interesting if Cody Bellinger signs someplace else, because that's when the Yankees kind of lose their safety blanket, and that's where their plan will definitely have to pivot, and Brian Cashman will have to kind of get creative. And given his track record when he gets creative, not the moves that you're like, oh yeah, as soon as you hear that, that makes sense. Like last year when they got Bellinger, that made sense. When they got Soto, everybody celebrated, clearly. But losing Bellinger is not as crazy as you think. And if the Yankees do lose him, they're going to have to go to plan B in a hurry. And losing Bellinger, he's a Boris guy. Boris guys go for the most money. And even though he's the Yankees' number one target, they might not have the largest offer. The Yankees don't win World Series anymore, and they certainly don't win bidding wars. And if the Mets ever decide that Cody Bellinger's a target for them, well, then I could definitely see him leaving very quickly. Now, maybe if Hal were to lose his number one target to the crosstown rivals for a second year in a row, maybe that might shake something up, but I'm not holding my breath. And honestly, given some of the numbers I'm hearing and the way that Steve Cohen generally overpays for things, this is a guy in Bellinger who got released by the Dodgers not that long ago. And the hype surrounding the fan base, it's starting to sound very much like when DJ LeMahieu became a free agent. We got to have him back under no set of circumstances. Can you lose him? And how did that work out? So I think that there should be a price for Bellinger. He's a good player, but he's not exactly been a track record of success. Even when he left the Dodgers and goes to the Cubs, that first year, big numbers, an OPS of like 140, and then after that, a big drop-off. And despite all the opportunities in October, career OPS in the playoffs of 660. But the issue is, what's the plan B? Because it's not going to, I can tell you right now what it's not going to be. It's not going to be Kyle Tucker. It's not going to be Fernando Tatis Jr. It's not going to be Bryce Harper bringing him in for Philadelphia. If Bellinger walks, Brian Cashman is going to have to pivot like he did last year. Last year, there were some pivot points. This year, it seems a lot harder to figure out what those pivot points would be. And it would almost certainly result in the Yankees having some probably major holes going into next year and playing it out and seeing how they can, patch them during the year. So the modern Yankees, that's their game plan. And I know it's not what the fan base wants to hear. They want to hear, this is the year we're going to finally, we haven't won a World Series in all these years. The reality is the Yankees don't operate that way anymore. There's been nothing to show you that the World Series drought is bothering Hal Steinbrenner to some great degree. So if the Yankees get their way and Cody Bellinger comes back, I'm telling you right now, this offseason is going to be pretty boring. Okay, we're joined now by, you hear him on the radio with the Yankees pre- and post-game, as well as calling games for WFAN. You see him on SNY a lot of time as well. Emmanuel Berbari is nice enough to join us here on the podcast. Emmanuel, what's going on, man?
Not much, Gordon. Good to be with you.
Well, look, this is the time where Yankee fans are starting to get excited about a big offseason, all the names that are getting floated out there. Before we get into the specifics, how active do you think that the Yankees will be this offseason?
It's funny. I have no clue on the range of one of the most mundane off seasons we've seen in a really long time and an extremely active offseason. I think the pendulum could swing any which way, and I know that's not the concrete answer that people are probably looking for, but I went into last year thinking, all right, plan A was, of course, Juan Soto and bring him back. But outside of that, there were a lot of core pieces that the Yankees wanted to give an opportunity to, whether it be Anthony Volpe at shortstop or Austin Wells as the full-time catcher behind the plate, or Ben Rice at the various positions we saw him in this year, first base, catcher, DH, Jason Dominguez in left field, even though that didn't quite materialize because of the years that Grisham and Bellinger ended up having. I look at this offseason pretty similarly in that we know how last year went. Juan Soto bolts for Queens. They bring in Bellinger. They bring in Goldschmidt. They bring in Max Fried. They pivot to plan B. Now a lot of those pieces are in place already. So even though the Yankee fan may not want to see Anthony Volpe run back out there once he's recovered from this shoulder labral tear, I think he will be. Yeah. And Austin Wells, the Yankees still believe in to a high degree as their starting catcher. So where, with Ryan McMahon being brought in to be the everyday third baseman, where exactly are the drastic changes being made in terms of the lineup? I think the Yankees could add to the pitching department, but barring some sort of unforeseen move, I could see a very quaint offseason. Or if they decide all of a sudden we're going after Kyle Tucker, we're going to be big spenders this offseason, I could see it, but I see the chances of that a little less so.
Do you see it? It seems like from everything you see and you read and you hear, Bellinger's plan A, and then everything falls in line after that. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I think the Yankees are going to have a hard cutoff with Cody Bellinger. I don't think they're going to do whatever it takes necessarily to bring this guy back. Juan Soto, we knew they were going to compete to the ends of the earth, and they at least came in with that $760 million offer at the end of the day. If Bellinger ever got to a 7-year, let's say, tier, I think the Yankees tap out. That's my read on the Cody Bellinger situation. And they also have internal numbers. I know the Yankees get criticized for being an analytically driven team.
Everyone is.
Everyone is across the league. Like, this is how baseball is played now. And a lot of the numbers being looked at with Cody Bellinger is he doesn't impact the ball quite the way that other star level players do. And what I mean by that is he's not scorching the ball to a level of even Ben Rice, who's one of the Yankees fabric young players. And I think part of that, don't let the eyes tell you, don't let your eyes convolute the picture here. Bellinger shortens up with 2 strikes. Mm-hmm. So some of the soft contact may be coming from him just being a more professional hitter than a lot of the guys in baseball right now. But I think projecting over a 7-year deal where he's aging, the Yankees may say it's just not all that worth it. I think that's part of the reason they extended the qualifying offer to Grisham when they didn't have to do it.
Yeah, it does seem like, it seems like plan A is clearly bring back Cody Bellinger, but he's not just the Yankees plan A. He would fit with the Mets in Queens where there is no budget. You take a look at what's out there on the market for guys who can play center field even reasonably well. There's not a lot of great options there. So I can understand why it's the Yankees' top option, but I think especially with Boris as his agent, he's going to have a lot of offers out there if he wants them.
He will, and the Yankees will have to play in those waters that they're uncomfortable with to bring him back, which is why I would caution anyone who thinks, they have to get Bellinger back. It's a slam dunk. I just don't think free agency is unpredictable, as we know, every single year. And especially with Bellinger, who I know the Mets haven't gotten a ton of buzz per se with Bellinger, and there hasn't been a ton linking them in their thinking in terms of Bellinger. He's a perfect fit for the Mets. So, like, if the Mets deem, okay, Pete Alonso's gone, and we need somebody who can play the outfield, which is an area of need for the Mets, who can play first base at an all-star level if we need him to.
Absolutely.
I know there hasn't been a lot of smoke and fire when it comes to Bellinger and the Mets, but we know the pocketbooks are there with Steve Cohen. If the Mets get involved, that could really hamper the Yankees' chances of bringing this guy back.
Yeah. There is a part of me that kind of gets a little bit, because the fan base wants Bellinger back too. It's giving me a little bit of DJ LeMahieu vibes. Like, there has to be a cutoff, right? When they had LeMahieu, those first 2 years, MVP candidate, anything and everything you could have wanted out of that acquisition. And then they got into free agency, and everyone, myself included, you got to bring back DJ LeMahieu. And he just wasn't the same player after that. So I see what you're saying. And I think the Yankees will, have a number in mind, whatever that number is, and that there will be a cutoff. And if you're a Yankee fan who's like complaining of a boring offseason, well, if they re-sign Bellinger, I think it probably will be. But if they don't re-sign Bellinger, it kind of really, I don't know that it'll turn out to be the good results we're hoping for, but it does make it a lot more of an interesting offseason that will require plan B to plan B from last year.
Right. It's like plan C almost, even though you got to take it 2 degrees further. And Bellinger, that would just make the offseason fascinating if he wants. Because if he comes back, then it's more or less the same team. You tinker around the edges, and that's why I think it could be a very quaint offseason. But if he's gone, the Yankees have to get creative. They have to rethink the way that this roster looks, and it will give them an excuse to do so. Do we see a trade with Cleveland for a Stephen Kwan? That's the type of guy I want in this lineup, who's a tough postseason at bat. I think the Yankees need more of those, because too often, I think the reason their lineup is so easily navigated at times in the playoffs, pitchers shouldn't have an opportunity to breathe easy. When the Yankees were at their best this year, 7, 8, 9 pitch at bats, they were working the pitch count, ton of big innings. I thought in the playoffs, when you looked at 6 through 9 in the Yankee order, it was a little bit of a breathe easy scenario for the opposing pitcher. And in the case of Game 4 against Toronto, that bullpen game, there were pockets that the Blue Jays really exploited in the Yankee lineup. So deepening it with more, not contact, I know that's like a buzzword in today's day and age. Like, it doesn't have to be a contact bat, just a guy who grinds you down. A lot of what we saw with Toronto this postseason.
Do you see any scenario where Kyle Tucker factors in for the Yankees with Bellinger, without I think you'd have to say without. Say Bellinger leaves. Is there any way you see the Yankees swimming in those waters?
Right, I know the dream scenario would be Bellinger resigns, and then they still go and get Tucker. Like, I mean, old school, like
Right.
all bets are off scenario for the big bad New York Yankees. But I think if Bellinger's back, that will not be in play. If he isn't, I never rule it out. Like maybe there's a world where Hal Steinbrenner says, "All right, we just lost a guy." Maybe if Bellinger walks to the Mets, maybe if that happens, it's like two off seasons in a row. Got our crosstown rivals taking our guy from us. Seemingly, I understand Soto was only with the Yankees for a year. They had every reason to feel like Juan Soto fit, and then there he goes to Flushing. If Bellinger does the same, maybe Hal Steinbrenner says we got some payroll flexibility. We want a guy who's going to be a superstar in the outfield long after Aaron Judge exits his prime, which is coming up, by the way, 34 years old for Aaron Judge. Maybe that would happen, but I'll put Kyle Tucker at about 15-20% right now if I'm trying to handicap the offseason.
All right. This is the time of year where it seems like every writer, every media member is trying to connect the Yankees to some big name. I don't buy any. Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz, Tucker to a certain degree as well. I just don't see the Yankees investing in one area. I think this is going to be an offseason where they'll invest with Bellinger if they can. And if they don't get him, well, then maybe that changes the plan. But I feel like this is much more tinkering around the edges, a pitcher, some bullpen help, some, maybe a trade, which is always kind of a possibility. Yankees always have that one kind of surprising move. How do you see this playing out in terms of some of the big names that get floated with the Yankees this time of year?
Yeah, I think it's very much a polishing off season. And again, that may come to some frustration from the fan base because they want radical change after another early postseason exit. I understand they were in the World Series the year before, but we've seen this a lot. ALDS, ALCS this year was Toronto as a division rival. You may want radical change. I see, you mentioned it, pitching depth. I see complementary pieces in the lineup. I think the Yankees look across their own league and they see teams like Toronto and Seattle, Cleveland to a lesser extent, Boston, they platoon really well. And that was the idea behind bringing in an Ahmed Rosario at the trade deadline, a Jose Caballero. Give you some roster flexibility to pinch hit and to mix and match. The Yankees want to follow that model a little bit more. So I think we could see some of those type of moves. What I would be curious about, you alluded to this, the one Brian Cashman move every offseason when we look up, we refresh X or wherever you get your information, and we say, whoa, that like last offseason to me, that was Devin Williams. I never expected him to be a Yankee. And all of a sudden we see Caleb Durbin and Nestor Cortez on a Milwaukee, and Devin Williams comes in. There's always that one. I think it could come this offseason from a player that's on the Yankees' current roster. Like, I'm not saying Jazz Chisholm gets traded, but that'll be one example. He's heading into a walk year. He's coming off a 30-30 season. If the Yankees are truly looking to shake up how their lineup feels, maybe they could ship him somewhere. I think that'd be one interesting move to watch for. Who in the existing lineup could get flipped by Brian Cashman for the one move this offseason we look at and say, oh, I didn't expect that one.
What do you do with Ben Rice? It seems like the guy, a plus 131 OPS plus last year, can certainly hit the exit velocities there, but doesn't really have a position. What would be your plan this offseason for Ben Rice if you ran the Yankees?
I think you pencil him in as your everyday first baseman and you get him as many reps as humanly possible playing that position defensively because he's gotten a lot better. He was never a first baseman coming up. He was a catcher. And the catching was a work in progress, and they introduced first base as a way to get him to the big leagues. That ended up happening with the Anthony Rizzo injury back a couple of years ago. And he's still shaky over there. He doesn't scoop the ball well. There are a lot of errors that could have been prevented with Ben Rice over at first this year. But he's an extremely hard worker. I think he could get himself sort of similar to how Pete Alonso wasn't always a reputable first baseman. Now no one's looking at Pete Alonso as a Gold Glover, but he could play the position. So can the Yankees get Ben Rice to a similar position over at first? Possibly. And then do you bring in some help? Do you bring in another first base option to platoon a la Paul Goldschmidt and the way they ended up doing it down the stretch this year? I'm not so sure because you want Ben Rice to line up each and every day. The ideal world with this guy in a non-Giancarlo Stanton world,
right?
He's your everyday DH / 30 to 50 games over at first base. That's not the world the Yankees are living in. So I think you just have to put him at first base and leave him there.
Yeah, and people will float catcher. If you could ever get that offense out of a catcher, That would be
Oh,
phenomenal. But catching is more difficult now with all the different relievers and the pitch types and the pitch shapes and framing and all these different types of things. It just feels like that's way too much to be throwing into a guy. I want to make his transition to being a full-time, and what we want is the offense. And then if you can just be passable defensively, and I think the road to that is much more at first base than behind the plate.
yeah, and I think the Yankees were very impressed with how mid-season he made that transition, still a developing catcher, stepped in behind the plate and held his own back there. But if you're trying to make him the best first baseman possible, trying to get him to catch your 50, 60 games, I just don't think is a smart move, especially with his bat and protecting that bat in the lineup. Less to think about. Ben Rice is catching side sessions all the time this year to try to make himself the best catcher possible. I don't want him worrying about that as much. So to me, the best alignment would be Wells, a righty hitting backup slash split share position behind the plate. And then Rice gets maybe 5-10 games behind the plate if you need it.
A couple other young names that get mentioned, and maybe, they're not Yankees much longer. Jason Dominguez is a fascinating one to me. A couple of years ago, this kid comes up. He's the Martian. You've been hearing about him since they signed him. The number, this year just kind of got lost in the mix because of some other guys who were just more productive. What do you see the future of Jason Dominguez with the Yankees?
I would love a future where you don't touch him and we just see what he is every single day at the major league level. Unfortunately, that's not always the case here with the Yankees in New York, because it seemed it was this hot rod issue. Every time a ball was hit up his way in left field last year, everyone was holding their breath like, oh, is he going to twist? Is he going to turn? Is he going to make the play? I think if that wasn't the narrative coming into the year, we would have been a little bit more patient with Dominguez, because he got far better in left field last year than even the year before. Still only 22 years old, worlds of talent. We saw glimpses of what he could do offensively. A knock on him is he can't hit right-handed, but that's his natural side. And there are fewer left-handers to face at the major league level. So he has to play a full season for us to gauge what he could do as a right-hand switch hitter at the major league level. So I would love to see the Yankees leave him alone and make him the everyday left fielder. But I think it's going to come down to what happens with Bellinger. Is Grisham back in the off chance he takes a qualifying offer? And then one of Dominguez or Jones, the Yankees have to decide this offseason. Which guy are we banking on? Which guy are we rolling with? The other one has no place. Just with the alignment of the outfield, one of those guys has to get dealt. So we're going to see, is it Jones? Is it Dominguez? Who's playing every day next year?
Yeah, before we move over to Spencer Jones, what has been Dominguez's issue in the outfield? Was he always a bad outfielder? Has he gotten like the yips? It just seems like something all of a sudden happened where I always thought that this kid was supposed to be a center fielder, and while he might not have the foot speed to cover that position, you would figure a transition to left wouldn't be as glaring as it's been. What has been the issue with him in left field?
So I have one personal anecdote with Dominguez in this area, and the transition to left is only a little bit more complicated because Yankee Stadium left field is huge. So it's almost tougher than center field in a couple of different ways. But I watched Dominguez play in A-ball, and he was with the Hudson Valley Renegades, and I was doing play-by-play for the Hudson Valley Renegades, and he was a center fielder. And I remember his roots of the ball were shaky. He was lightning quick, and he could cover immense levels of ground, but sometimes he would overrun the ball a little bit. He'd have to redirect himself just to find his way back to the spot. But again, the guy was an A-ball. So, what am I saying that's automatically making him a bad outfielder when he's 19 years old and patrolling center field at Dutchess Stadium? So I think maybe he's just a little bit raw out there, but his natural position is center field. So if you moved him back over there in a world without Cody Bellinger, I still wouldn't rule out that this guy can play center field. I just think he's very raw, and this guy was signed at 16 years old and then missed a year of development with COVID. So he hasn't played a lot of professional baseball, period. I would still be curious if he could play center field. I just don't think he's going to get that chance here in New York.
Yeah, it feels like with Dominguez, he's been here so long, you think he's like 25, 26. It feels like we've been talking about him for 10 years. He's still a very young prospect. And even last year, he wasn't a negative. I don't remember what his OPS plus. I think it was slightly above average last year, or maybe just below that. But it wasn't like he was completely lost altogether.
No, especially considering the everyday reps starting to get robbed in the middle of the season. Just by necessity. Bellinger was having an incredible year. You couldn't do a rotation in the outfield with Cody Bellinger and sit him down once every 3 days. And you couldn't do it with Trent Grisham once he became the clutch home run machine and your everyday center fielder. So Dominguez and the idea and the designs of getting him everyday reps just sort of vanish in the middle of the year. But offensively, I was very impressed. With that limited opportunity, he had 2-3 week stretches in the middle of the year where you're like, wow, this guy can spray the ball all over the field. And he gives the Yankees that dimension on the base paths where I'd much rather, if Jazz Chisholm is still on this team, I'd rather have him and Dominguez hitting back to back near the bottom of the order with a Volpe and just introduce that speed element and that going first to third. The Yankees were exciting when Dominguez was at his best this year. And I think we'll see more power if he plays every day. I think it was so sporadic that we didn't get to see that much.
There's been so much change. When I was a kid and George was running the show, it was commonplace every year where a prospect or two was getting dealt. And then you knew in a couple of years, be it Doug Drabeck, be it Fred McGriff, whoever it was, they were going to come back and bite the Yankees. That is one thing that has completely changed. Very rarely do the Yankees trade away a prospect and that guy becomes like a really major impact player. Spencer Jones is fascinating. We've been hearing about him for a very long time, and we've not seen him at the major league level. I don't think we'll ever see him be a full-time New York Yankee. What's your read on Spencer Jones's future here?
I think the Yankees are very high on him, and they're much higher on him than they were going into last year. Because I remember even going into last year, it's amazing how all this has changed. Spencer Jones was striking out 40% of the time in the minor leagues, and everyone was sort of thinking, is this really going to work out? And they were seeing all this tinkering with his batting stance when they would see clips on social media. And people who just didn't watch him every day were thinking, all right, this probably isn't going to work out. And then he goes on that tear in the month leading up to the trade deadline this year and sort of reclaims his trade value, first and foremost, but also reclaims what the Yankees thought of him prior, which is, all right, he may strike out a lot, incredible athlete, he can steal bases, he can maybe pop 30, 35 home runs at the major league level. And I love the people who like to knock Spencer Jones and say, oh, well, best case, he's Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo was a really good player.
He's an all-star player a couple of times. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I don't want the end of Joey Gallo's career to be Spencer Jones, but he was an all-star player. So we should all hope that a prospect turns into Joey Gallo because that'll be a prospect success story. My fear is that the window is now closing on his trade value. Yeah. So if the Yankees don't view there's a lane, as they would say, for him to play every day in left, like we were talking about with Dominguez, every day in center field as well, you got to move him because I could see this easily turning into the Clint Frazier and Miguel Andujar and Estevan Florial and some of the recent examples of guys who had really high ceilings and the Yankees held on to for good reason in some cases. But then, all right, they either got to play all the time or they got to get moved.
Yeah. All right, let's move over to the pitching side because, there's a lot of resources invested in the Yankee pitching, especially in the starting pitching, but there's a lot of questions there as well. You got Cole coming off Tommy John surgery. You kind of think, oh, it was last year. It usually takes a little while. Who knows if he's going to be ready to go for the start of the season. We know Rodon is not going to be ready for the start of the season. Even guys that you are counting on, Max Fried had a very healthy season. That's not always been the case with him. Do you see the Yankees being in play for any starting pitching or do you think it's going to be more like a swing guy where he might be able to start some, but it's more in the relief area?
I could see swing in free agency. And then if we see anything bigger in the starting rotation, be that unexpected move where maybe Brian Cashman swings a trade for somebody we're not expecting that we don't know is available at the current moment. It wouldn't be Skubal. I think it wouldn't be Ski. It wouldn't be those top names we hear people.
You're not going to get Paul Skeens for a deal.
Yeah. I mean, sign me up for that rotation if Paul Skeens winds up in pinstripes and the box office event that would be. But I think the Yankees would be making a mistake if they didn't add to the starting rotation because you alluded to some of the concerns here. Garrett Cole, not only coming back, he's not starting the season on time, but also what is he going to look like? You got to give him some time to feel his way back in at 36 years old. Max Fried, amazing year one. I understand he had the one blip in the postseason. Amazing year one. Is he as healthy and reliable in year two? I mean, it was off the charts what he did in year one. So law of averages would tell me there's probably some sort of deviation there. Carlos Rodon's coming off his best year as a Yankee. He won't start the season on time. He had that elbow cleanup surgery at the end of the year. Best case scenario, he's in the Yankee rotation in May. Clark Schmidt won't start the year on time. Cam Schlittler, I understand we should all be drinking the Kool-Aid right now with what he did down the stretch and against the Boston Red Sox, even against the Toronto Blue Jays, where he wasn't the reason the Yankees lost that game 4. Now he's your number 2 starter.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into opening day. And we know there's the inevitable spring training injury where you show up and everybody's mapping out your rotation. This is why when Marcus Stroman said I'm a starting pitcher last year and everyone laughed at him, he was right. He ended up getting starts because every team, every organization has pitching injuries. That's a reality of today's baseball. So I think the Yankees will add to starting pitching, and I'd be curious, do they trade for a starting pitcher that we don't expect?
Yeah, and plus, I think that they want to kind of follow the role model of the Dodgers. You know, the Dodgers had a lot of injuries last year, and, you know, if they wanted to, I'm sure Ohtani could have pitched before he actually did pitch, but they looked at it as, hey, we want your how many innings we're going to get from you. We want those best innings late in the season. They're not going to push Cole to start the year or any of these guys to start the year. Even maybe when they're ready to go, maybe they want to be a little bit cautious considering age and injury factors as well. One guy who's out there who it would be kind of the top end of the swing market would be a guy the Yankees have had in the past, and that would be Michael King. You see any possibility as a reunion there as a guy who certainly started well and has relieved in his career too?
Sign me up. That's the type of move where on the open market, this isn't signing Framber Valdez to a 6 or 7 year contract. We're talking about King on a 3-year-ish deal. He slides into the middle of your rotation with high-end upside. Like we saw a couple of years ago with San Diego, that guy could be an ace, but his floor is also very high. So I like his makeup and his confidence to pitch here, which he's done. You talk to Aaron Boone or anyone around the Yankees, Michael King, Clark Schmidt included, the most confident guys they've talked to. Michael King wants the ball. He's that type of guy, and he believes in himself more than anybody. I think he wants to be back here. So it's just a matter of if the numbers would line up. That would be the ideal ad for me in the rotation because you wouldn't have to part with anybody and get somebody via the trade market. You could slide him in. That's insurance for the time you're going to miss with Carlos Rodon to start the year and Clark Schmidt and Garrett Cole. You could start the year with Fried and King and Schlittler and Heel and feel really good about yourself. Will Warren at the back end of the rotation. So I would target Michael King. I wonder how high the AAV is going to get and whether the Yankees get uncomfortable with it. But let's say it sits in the 20 to 25 range. I could see a reunion.
Yeah, bullpen is something the Yankees under Brian Cashman have always done a very good job of finding guys, identifying guys who are undervalued other places. Clay Holmes a couple of years ago, so some other guys along the way. Do you see? It almost feels like in the last year or so that kind of this past year the bullpen was a constant issue. Usually, you give the Yankees a first month or two to kind of put guys in roles and kind of figure things out. It never really. They made some moves at the trade deadline and it got better. But Devin Williams was kind of an issue all year, not at the end, but certainly a lot in the middle, and that was their big move. It seems like the Yankees have kind of gotten off track a little bit on the bullpen. How many resources do you think that they're going to be? Not that it's going to be the high-end money stuff, but how much attention do you think they're going to be looking outside the organization to kind of remedy the bullpen?
Yeah, this is the first year. It's a good point. First year in recent memory where I come out of the year saying, wow, the bullpen was shaky on the whole. Even the moves that they made at the trade deadline. Bednar was great. Bednar panned out. Doval didn't until the very end where they found something with him. Devin Williams in the offseason trading for him. You talk about a rocky year and finished well, but rocky puts it mildly.
Yeah. And you would not expect him back, right? Even though he could.
I wouldn't unless if somehow the price lines up and it's on a discount. I know Devin Williams would welcome the idea. He actually warmed up well to New York, I think, by the end and really settled in here. So he would welcome it. I just don't see it in terms of other teams will value him as the closer and the dominant guy that we saw flashes of and he used to be. I think he gets his contract elsewhere. But the Yankees would welcome that on a discount. And then you look at the deadline you were talking about. A guy like Jake Bird was optioned a week into becoming a Yankee. Could he factor into the bullpen next year? I think the Yankees had a lot of carryover of guys they believed in at one point this year that didn't necessarily work out. Like Ian Hamilton, I don't see him on next year's team. Scott Efros, not on next year's team. Jonathan Loaiska, Yankees already declined his option because he gets hurt so often. The Yankees have had a lot of success stories off the scrap heap that once 2-3 years pass, I think you start to realize why they were, let's find something in this guy as opposed to here's a reputable track record option we could go out and sign. I don't see them spending big money on the bullpen, but would I be shocked if they bid for a Robert Suarez? I would not be whatsoever. I think they're a piece shy at the back end of that bullpen where you have Bednar lined up. I think they expect more out of Doval. Jake Bird, I just mentioned, they probably want him as part of that bullpen, but it was rocky when he got here. I think they add 1 to 2 bullpen pieces high end.
Luke Weaver, you think he's back in any way?
I don't. I think everyone would love it in that clubhouse. Like, that's as beloved a guy in the Yankee clubhouse as has been in quite some time. And I know Luke Weaver, for the success story he was coming over here and all the failure he'd had at the major league level as a starter, and then being the guy who closes out the Yankees' first pennant since 2009, that was quite a trajectory. And then he had the injury this year, the midseason where he gets pummeled by George Springer in Toronto that one weekend in July. And then the pitch chipping starts coming into the fray. I think there was some miscommunication between Luke Weaver and the Yankees on what exactly he had to do to fix the pitch tipping. And I think Luke Weaver believes in himself, but I do wonder now on the open market, other teams, are they looking at Luke Weaver and thinking, here's the guy who's the Yankees closer in a World Series run, or is here the guy, once again, we have to figure something out with again? And if they look at the latter, maybe he could come back to the Yankees on a discount, but I do think somebody's going to pay him just enough of what he wants, and it won't be the Yankees.
All right, last one. We've heard a lot of, I have not seen these guys, but we've heard a lot of some of the younger pitchers the Yankees have available, ERC, Ben Hess, some of those guys. Do you think that they're going to be a factor in any way this offseason, either be, getting called up to the majors to start the year because of some pitching issues, or do you think that those guys could be involved in trades to bring something back?
They could be involved in trades. I would never rule that out. ERC in particular, I just keep hearing Elmer Rodriguez Cruz's name being tossed around as a legit guy who could factor into the rotation for years to come. And the Yankees are very, especially coming off Cam Schlittler and to a lesser extent, Will Warren. And Warren was up the entire year doing what he did. The Yankees are very high on their pitching development program right now, where I could see them rolling into the year, barring injury in spring training, like we were talking about earlier. Could an ERC crack the back end of that rotation? I wouldn't rule it out. Crazier things have happened, and the Yankees now are starting to develop some sort of a track record. Even Luke Clark-Schmidt into that mold of developing these starting pitchers who can be at least serviceable to very good at the major league level right away. So I would not rule that out. I could see one of those guys cracking the rotation at some point early in the season, rest of them on the trade block for potential moves.
Emmanuel, the Yankees, they're never boring. We can say that for sure in the offseason. There's always rumor, and sometimes when it's the most quiet, that's when you know something's going to happen. So thanks for the time, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks, Gordon. Appreciate having me.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
All right, let's talk a little NFL and a little NBA. First up, the Giants head coaching position. Dan Duggan of The Athletic put up a list of 20 names. Dan's got it surrounded. It's got to be one of these 20. 20 names that he floated as possibilities for the next head coach of the Giants. Mike Kafka's name is on there. I'm not going to run through all the names because a lot of them have been mentioned already. I've told you it's not going to be John Gruden. That's just not the Giants' way. I know that they're down right now, but they're not. I mean, they're not that far down that they're going to completely do something that is just not their style. So it's not going to be John Gruden. Nick Saban's name is on the list. I don't think it's going to be Nick Saban. And the amount of people, it's not going to be Bill Belichick either, and it shouldn't be Bill Belichick. And the amount of media people who have done nothing but rip Bill Belichick for the last 5 years as being out of touch and being, all the different things. And look, rightfully so, with the way things have gone in the last couple of years in New England and now in North Carolina. He's not the same guy anymore. So, but the amount of people that are still, I would take a shot. Take a shot. Come on. All right, so the three names, I'll give you one name that would be my number one target, who I would settle for, number two, And then finally, who I think it's going to be. My number one target would be Matt LaFleur. If this guy actually, now he's got a job right now, but I'd be willing to give up draft pick compensation to get him. Still young, offensive-minded guy, track record of success. I know he's not won a Super Bowl before, but look, the chances that the next guy is going to lead you to the Super Bowl, let's establish credibility. Let's get somebody who we know can actually coach. And Matt LaFleur has won twice as many games as he's lost. Every year the guy's in playoff contention and has worked well with different quarterbacks. So that would be my number one choice. My second choice is one that I feel like people are sleeping on so much, and I get it. It's not a sexy candidate, but I would settle for Mike McCarthy. To me, Mike McCarthy is the guy before the guy. A lot of times in sports, when you're down bad, you got to bring in somebody that is at least going to establish a foundation. Tom Thibodeau with the Knicks. Buck Showalter with the Yankees. He might not be the guy that gets you to the top, but at least he's going to come in and form a credible organization that's not 2-8 every single year. Now, he would not be my number one choice, but he would not be my last choice either. And some people make it out like Mike McCarthy. Oh my God, Mike McCarthy. In the same breath, they're telling you about Bill Belichick. It's like, guys, Mike McCarthy has had success more recently than Bill Belichick has. And he doesn't have a 24-year-old girlfriend on the sidelines either. I don't think either of those guys are going to get the job. The guy I think is going to get the job, Lou Anarumo. He's the defensive coordinator with the Colts. He's a former Giant assistant, and most importantly, he's got a connection with Joe Schoen. They go back to their days with the Dolphins, and if Joe Schoen is actually going to keep the GM job, and until he's gone, I guess you have to consider he's going to go with somebody he knows, but the connection is going to be key. He is going, and I think it's a mistake, and I don't think it's set in stone as of yet because the Giants are still going to probably lose a bunch of games. But you keep hearing about Lou Anarumo. He's from the area. That's always so important. Guys, that's not important. You know what's important? Winning games, having a track record of success. And Lou Anarumo might be, I don't know, the next best head coach. Who knows? But he's not done it so far as a head coach, and that to me is a major red flag. All right, the Nico Harrison thing, not exactly a shocker. Fired as the GM of the Dallas Mavericks. And look, this was one, talk about not a shocker. It was basically just pick your date from the time the Luka Dončić trade was made. That trade was baffling in the moment. Time heals all wounds. It did not heal that wound clearly because that trade still looks very, very strange. And from that moment on, he was dead man walking. Let's be honest. You know, bringing in Anthony Davis and trying to paint this as we're more ready to be a playoff contender right now. I saw a number. I think that Anthony Davis, since that trade, has played in 14 games or 15 games. They've played like 45 or 46. So that obviously did not work out as part of the trade. And there was also reports in The Athletic that Davis was trying to be pushed back to play even despite his injury, which, yeah, if you're a GM who's trying to make a trade not look like a disaster, you start doing desperate things. Joe Schoen in New York, Nico Harrison in Dallas. Here's the thing. You look up the Mavericks, and they have 3 wins. So it is clearly not work. Like, who would have expected it would be this bad, though? The thing that I've seen floated a lot, though, and I guess history will only tell us, is that since this has happened and he got fired, there's been a lot of reports, well, you know, Nico Harrison, he was simply the fall guy for ownership. He didn't make this trade. It was ownership who wanted it out, and they put it on Nico Harrison to come up with a deal. He didn't want to make the trade. He was not the architect of it. He was just he was the fall guy for the trade. And look, that lines up. To think that you could take, any executive would take a prized superstar like Luka and not drive up the price, not offer him around the league, simply call the Lakers and offer him in a deal and make the deal before really anybody in the league knew he was even available. That does seem like, so, you know, who knows? You know, with Mark Cuban gone, there might have been a power vacuum there, and he was being forced, Nico Harrison, to execute a trade and do as he was told. That does seem believable. But here's the real test. And this is, you know, the kids say a ball don't lie. Does Nico Harrison get another GM job in the NBA? Clearly, it's not going to be right away. But if he was covering up for the owner, if he was just simply following orders, people within the league will know that. right? Like they'll know this guy wasn't the architect of one of the worst trades. He was forced to do that. And either an owner will want another fall guy and know, hey, Nico Harrison will certainly, the Dolphins owner down in Miami, maybe he can switch sports and become the Dolphins GM. They're looking for a GM right now. But another owner within the league will want his own, for whatever reasons. Or maybe somebody will look at it and say, you know what, we know that he actually did some good moves before the Luka trade. He was seen as a good GM, getting the Mavericks to the finals when they did. So maybe he'll get another shot. If he doesn't get another shot, the idea that he was just following orders seems very hard to believe. Like people within league circles know what actually goes down in these things, even if the public might not, or you might not have confirmation or not. People within the league do know. So if his phone never rings again, I think you have your answer that there was something else at work here, and Nico Harrison should get the blame for one of the worst trades that we will ever see, not just in the NBA, but in professional sports. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Make sure, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you are listening or watching on, especially on YouTube. And we'll see you next week on a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports.